Hello again, and it's time to start talking about the big issues again. Now, what I wanted to focus on today was the topic of change and whether or not Barack Obama, our new president, is delivering on some of his promises. Now, it is still a little too early to make fair judgment calls on everything. After all, the recession we're in was caused by the last administration's policies, not by this one. But what I want to talk about is whether or not the next few years is going to usher in an era of progressive politics or not, because that was a lot of the impetus behind the campaign for Obama's election and the Democrats in Congress, was to change the course that the country was in. That's what they campaigned on. Will they deliver? Well, there have been some promising things. Shutting down Guantanamo Bay. They haven't finished it, but they've started the process. Changing some, not all, but some of the surveillance rules of the Bush administration. Focusing more on Afghanistan rather than Iraq when it comes to fighting terrorism. Now, it could be that Afghanistan fails too, but at least in the case of Obama, we're not conjuring up a fake threat like we did against Iraq. So there's a bit more honesty there. Now, when it comes to cultural issues, I'm a little bit more concerned because Don't Ask, Don't Tell is still in place. DOMA hasn't been repealed. Anti-discrimination and hate crimes laws have yet to be passed. And even on non-gay related issues that have to do with the culture war, we haven't overturned the faith-based initiatives, and abstinence-only funding is still in force. So I would like to see more of a liberal cultural agenda, not radical, but just the most important thing is that we wipe out the hardcore far-right agenda and its legacy over the past 20 years in public policy, because we have the mandate now to do it. It would be cowardly for the Democrats to compromise on that. Now, health care. This is a big issue because it looks like the insurance companies are getting in there and weaseling down the reform and watering it down to the point where it's not going to be very effective. Again, the problem is that Democratic politicians have been too willing to compromise with the other side without understanding that the other side doesn't want to compromise. It's capitulation. So the left, as it stands in this country, needs to show more fortitude, more courage, more ability to stand up and take a hard line against the opposite side, which has been taking a hard line itself for so many years. It's our turn. We can't afford to water down our agenda in the name of compromise, 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 because then nothing gets done. So it's important to stick with a solid public option on health insurance. Anything less, put it this way, any sort of health care reform that's good for insurance corporate profits is bad for America. Simply put as that. There is no way around it. Now, the next economic agenda has got to be financial re-regulation. We cannot afford to go back to the casino capitalism of the past few years. We have to re-regulate the financial markets to stop this dangerous games that we're playing that cause the whole system to collapse. We can't, and also we can't afford to have our economy run on credit bubbles anymore either. That didn't work. It worked for a while. You could have stagnating incomes in this country for the majority of the people, but keep consumption up through increasing household debt. That's not going to work anymore. Any real recovery of the economy is going to have to result in median incomes going up again, like they haven't done since the 60s and early 70s. Now, in order to pay for the kind of social programs that I think we need in this country, shoring up education, infrastructure, providing more assistance to the working poor, etc., etc., health care reform and subsidies on that, the revenue is going to have to come from somewhere. That means somebody's going to have to pay higher taxes. And if we're going to be serious about not shunting too many tax increases onto the middle classes, it means the incomes at the top, the people making more than about $200,000, and especially households making over $1 million a year, their tax increase rates are going to have to go up to I'd say at the very least several percentage points higher than they were in the Clinton years. 39.6 is not going to cut it. Got to be at least the mid-40s, probably even in the low 50s if we're serious about getting enough revenue to pay for the things that we need. Now, some conservatives are screaming that that's going to wreck the economy. Don't listen to them. We had 91% rates in the 50s. We had 70% rates in the 60s and early 70s. We can handle a 50% rate today if we want to. Okay, workers' rights. One of the big factors in increasing inequality and wage stagnation, median income stagnation over the past 30 years has been the weakening of unions. This has been because employers have gotten away with illegal firings and union bustings, and the government has not been enforcing workers' rights because it's been run by political puppets who only care about the interests of big business. This has to change. The Employee Free Choice Act has already been watered down a little bit. We can't afford to cut it out anymore. The government has got to get serious about punishing employers who violate workers' rights. Workers have the right to bargain collectively for a fair share of the income produced by the business. There's no getting around it. And finally, climate change. There's no time to wait on this anymore. We've got to get going. We've got to put in tax incentives for renewable energy, tax incentives for cars that have lower emission standards. We've got to also do something about designing and zoning our cities and our town planning to make people less dependent upon individual automobiles and long commutes, because that burns energy like crazy. So we've got to start talking about shortening the length of commutes. It would also mean more leisure time for most families, which is a good thing. We've got to talk about improving mass transit. We've got to do carpooling, everything. It has to be oriented towards getting rid of this business of commuting 2 hours a day alone in a car. That's a very bad model, and anyone who defends it and wants to keep it in place is either a total bonehead or they're one of the corporate interests who profits off of blocking social progress. So that's got to end. If we get serious and stand up to the teabaggers, the far right, the Rush Limbaugh crowd, the astroturfers, and we demand change, I'm confident our country will finally get back on a good direction. But it will require progressives and moderates to stand up and just say no to the baloney that's been fed us by the far right for the last 30 years. They lost the last 2 elections. They have no right to dictate the direction that public policy is going in this country because they screwed it up royally. It's our turn now. That's about all I have to say. This is Carl Bonner signing off.